Stormy Daniels, an adult porn actress known as Stephanie Clifford in her real life, has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump. And of course, this has to do with the $130,000 payment that she received from Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, and the non-disclosure agreement that she had signed as in return for that payment. Now, the lawsuit essentially claims that since Cohen's been talking about this case, and since Trump himself did not sign that non-disclosure agreement, then it's null and void, essentially freeing her to share her story and talk about what she's experienced. She's also claiming that Michael Cohen, up until very recently, had been threatening her and telling her not to share the details of this story with the public. Now, she did file a civil suit against the president in Los Angeles Superior Court on Tuesday, alleging that since Trump never signed the non-disclosure agreement their lawyers set up weeks before the 2016 election, their hush agreement is null and void. There are other components of this lawsuit, though, that I want to share with you guys. Clifford and Cohen signed the contract, but Trump never did. The suit alleges that he purposefully did not sign the agreement so he could later, if need be, publicly disavow any knowledge of the agreement or Clifford. The suit argues that even if the hush agreement was valid without Trump's signature, Cohen voided it when he made multiple statements to the media, and we know that he did. He talked about how he paid that $130,000 out of his own pocket, that Trump knew nothing about it. And even if that were the case, there are some potential legal consequences to that. We'll get into that in just a minute. The lawsuit also alleges that when the story went public in January, Cohen used intimidation and coercive tactics to force her to sign a false statement denying that she had an affair with Trump. If that is proven to be true, that could also have severe consequences for Cohen himself. He could potentially get disbarred, and again, we'll touch on that in just a minute. Also, the hush agreement says Clifford has confidential information related to Trump, which includes, quote, information, certain still images and or text messages.
Okay, that's really important. So let's begin to break it down. First, let me start with that last part. When this story first came out, I had two thoughts about it. One, I don't care. So he slept with a porn star. Is anyone surprised? Melania, are you really surprised? No one should be surprised by this. And I don't care what he does in his personal life. And by the way, Trump is not a guy who ran on family values. He's a Republican and all the evangelicals loved him, but that's their problem, not my problem. Trump didn't say that he was the best family guy, to be fair to him. He was on a picture on the Playboy cover when evangelical leaders were posing with him in his office, etc. So that salacious part of the story is totally uninteresting to me. It's fun, but it's not politically important. But I was wondering, why did they pay her? There was already 21 women who had accused him of far worse things, sexual assault, sexual harassment. This was consensual. So, okay, he didn't want it to get out because it was right after Melania was having Barron, and that's awkward. But I'm like, but Trump, he could just deny it. I mean, that's the #1 go-to move for Trump. I deny it. I strongly deny it, right? So why in this case did he bother to pay the $130,000 and potentially get himself into legal trouble? Oh, she had pictures and texts. So the texts are bad because it's going to show definitively coming from Trump's phone, probably. That's why they mentioned it in the lawsuit. And it's going to say the stuff that's dirty. That's one thing, and maybe bad enough. But if she's got pictures, okay, right?
Oh my God.
That's why they settled. I'm like, oh, that now, when I saw that in the complaint, I was like, that's it. Now it makes sense. Okay, so that fits in, explains why we're even in the middle of this mess. Now let's talk about the legal ramifications. So now it's one thing for Michael Cohen to get her to do a non-disclosure agreement or a hush agreement. That happens all the time. That's perfectly normal and legal. Now that's basically saying this might or might not have happened, but I definitely don't want you to talk about it, okay? Sometimes people do that just to get rid of a headache, and if it's a small amount, and that's fairly normal. This is a large amount, and coming out of the lawyer's own pocket is really weird. That gives you an indication that perhaps it did happen, right? And then they want her to be quiet about it. But that's, either way, that's fine. But when you ask her to say it didn't happen, that's a totally different situation. And when you have her sign something that they're going to put out publicly, as they did recently when the news broke, and you know that it did happen, and that's why you paid her the hush money in the first place, well, you took a thing that was perfectly legal and then made it illegal. And so even if you don't go to jail over that or anything like that, you're going to get disbarred. I mean, that is disbarment 101 for a lawyer to ask someone to put out a false statement that you know is false. Okay, and now with his own admissions that he was involved, that's also pretty much proving that he knew that those statements were false and that they were doing this. Okay, so look, again, they're going to have to go through legal proceedings to disbar him, etc. But a world of trouble there. Okay, now point 2 is way more important. So that's Michael Cohen's problem. That's a lawyer, and see what happens, right? But the fact that Trump did not pay her is a bigger problem. They actually handled this in the worst possible way. Because if Trump had said, yes, I slept with a porn star, what are you going to do about it? There's actually no legal issue there at all. If he had said, I deny it, I strongly deny it, still no legal issue. He lied, oh, so what? Like politicians lie all the time, he's lied a million times, that has no legal implications. But when they say Trump didn't pay it, Michael Cohen did. Trump can give money to his own campaign. Someone else cannot give $130,000 to Trump's campaign. That's an in-kind contribution. They'll make the case, oh no, it wasn't related to the campaign. It happened right before the election, but that's not why we settled it. Good luck with that. But overall, it is clear that it was right before the election, related to the campaign. Michael Cohen paid $130,000, which is way above the limit. Michael Cohen's going to jail. Now look, this is a thing.
He's not going to jail.
Okay, if there was any justice in the world,
there's no justice.
And the FEC operated, but it's not just the FEC. FEC is useless. That's the Federal Election Commission. They got 3 Republicans that'll block anything. If Michael Cohen came out on national TV drunk, like Sam Nunberg, or straight or sober, and came out and said, yes, I had her do a false statement. Yes, I gave $130,000 in-kind contribution that I illegally shouldn't have given. The FEC, 3 Republicans will go, nope, not buying it. Okay, not free to go. But it's also a violation of laws in states. And in the state of New York, local prosecutors can go after him. So we'll see if that plays out. Now, the last part of the puzzle is political. Now, Michael Cohen now in a lot of legal and career trouble, a lot, okay? And apparently, and recent story that came out just yesterday, Michael Cohen tried to go get the $130,000 from Trump because he's like, man, wait, I thought you were gonna pay me back. I gave her $130,000, but I didn't sleep with her, you slept with her. He apparently had trouble getting his call returned. So what happened? Trump, as usual, screwed him. That's what he does to everyone, including his closest allies, and now apparently his lawyer. Here's a person you don't want to screw over, your lawyer. He knows everything about you. So if Cohen, faced with a lot of legal jeopardy, turns on Trump, okay.
So I have absolutely no hope whatsoever when it comes to Cohen getting in trouble for making an in-kind campaign contribution. And the reason why I say that is because he could easily say, as his defense, that he had made that contribution not to help Trump's campaign, but to prevent the information from getting out and harming Trump's family. I remember Edwards had made a similar argument or case when there was some money involved in the affair that he had. Right? I
know, but Anna, look, I wouldn't be so sure. I hear you because almost like there's rampant corruption in America. Almost everyone gets away with it. So you're right to be skeptical overall. But some people do go to jail for campaign violations. Just ask Dinesh D'Souza. And so he got his mistress to give extra money, but he paid her back, which was actually meant that he went over the limit and he lied about it. And he went to jail. So it happens, especially the conservative idiots who don't even know how to do corruption. Most of it is legal. You can just give it to a PAC. You can do an independent expenditure. You can do dark money. You can do it 100 different ways, but you can't do this, where an individual gives $130,000 essentially to a campaign, right? Dinesh D'Souza, I think, gave $10,000 with him and his mistress, and maybe his wife, real classy guy, okay? And look up the details online. And then he had to go to prison for it. So Michael Cohen looks like he's not only in trouble, but reeling. The fact that he's going to the press and now saying like, well, I mean, there was an agreement but Trump didn't sign it and I don't have the money. Okay, that's bad news for Trump, man. Now, if Trump pays him the money, he's damned if he does. If he doesn't pay him the money, then Cohen's in trouble, damned if he doesn't, right? So, and she's gonna win on this particular lawsuit. Why? You don't get to do a non-disclosure agreement that you didn't sign. So maybe she is not allowed to disclose things about Michael Cohen because he signed, but Trump never signed. That's the essence of a contract. You did not agree. You were not a party to that contract. She can say anything she wants about you. Tick, 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 tick. A wonderful little time bomb there. And speaking of wonderful, credit to whoever came up with that graphic.
I did.
Oh, look at this. Okay.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
To come up with porn ultimatum.
Yeah.
If you like this video, bless your heart. We got a lot more where that came from. We do a full show every day, Monday through Friday. Come enjoy it ad-free by becoming a member. tytnetwork.com/join.